automatic. You must know about it, and you must apply for it in order to receive it. Our 48 field offices around the state provide information and assistance to our veterans to help them attain the VA benefits to which they are entitled. We support the governor's recommended budget for fiscal year 2018. However, there are a few issues we want to discuss with you. With me today to present our comments on this budget is Mr. Dan Holtz, our Assistant Commissioner for Administration, Health, and Memorials. At this time, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Mr. Holtz. Mr. Dan Holtz.
Thank you, Commissioner Wheeler. Madam Chairman, members of the committee, it's good to be here again. It's good to see you. At least it's not raining today like it was the other day when we were over here. The packet that you have appears to be rather daunting, but I'm not going to cover all of the pages in it. I want to try and just cover some highlights. Basically, we're dealing on your tracking document with pages 116 and 117. So if we could turn to, on the briefing packet, page number 5, which talks about the budget summary, and this is just an encapsulation of what shows up in the tracking document. Basically is a summary page of the proposed net changes that are in the governor's recommended budget. We started off with a baseline of $20,536,594, and with the net changes, that drops down to $20,429,441. If you go over to page 8 on the slides, I want to take a moment to talk about our cemeteries program. You will recall when we appeared before you on the amended 2012, we expressed concern about a cash flow issue that was in the 2012 budget. That same cash flow issue is with us here in the 2013 budget. The difference is the amount. The VA payment or reimbursement for burials has gone up from $3 per burial to $7 per burial of a veteran. And that only covers veterans. It doesn't include family members. The offset that was calculated by OPB is $142,304, which is the expectation on what we will claim, and eventually we should get those dollars. The problem is the VA doesn't pay on a straight line like we claim on a straight line. And so historically we have seen claims that were filed last July and August that weren't paid until December of this past year. And so that's the cash flow issue that concerns us. So we're asking that that $142,000 be reduced down to $94,500. We think that's a more reasonable number that we can deal with and should take care of the cash flow concerns that we have for fiscal year 13. If you turn to page 14, we had some what we called, actually we didn't quite know what to call them. They're unfunded or offline requests that we submitted to OPB. We want to, the first 4 that are there are issues that we submitted to OPB. The last one, which I'll talk about in a moment, is something that came up out of some legislation that is pending over in the Georgia Senate at this time. The first 4, the first one, if you'll turn to the next page, page 15, we had 8 positions that were in our Veterans Benefits program. 2 of those were in our Claims and Appeals Division, and the other 6 were at 6 of our 48 field offices. Those were put into the program back in fiscal 09. We had money there for them, and just as we were getting ready to hire them, the word came out from the governor's office to freeze the 09 expenditures, and they took money back from us, and so we were unable to fill those 8 positions. However, we had an agreement with OPB at the time to leave the positions on the books unfunded, and they remained that way until January of this year when Governor Deal reduced unoccupied positions. I think there were roughly around 14,000 of those across all agencies, and so we lost these 8 positions at that time, and we would like to get those reestablished, and we did put that requirement in. In each of the cases that we're looking at, with the exception of Columbus and to some extent Warner Robins, they're basically rural areas of Georgia, but yet they have high veteran populations. And we've seen a lot of workload coming out of those areas, and we need to try and build those up so that we've got the personnel and staff to assist the veterans who live in those areas. The next one on page 16, the 3 counties that have the largest population of veterans in the state are Cobb, Fulton, and Gwinnett. And we do not have a field service office in Cobb and Gwinnett. We do have a small office over across the street in the Twin Towers that covers Fulton County and anybody who comes down into Atlanta to receive services. What we are concerned about there is the folks, particularly in Cobb and Gwinnett, without having a field service office in their immediate area, are having to go to offices that we have in Rome, Canton, Cartersville, Gainesville, Clarksville, Conyers, Griffin, Newman, Carrollton, and Cedartown. And that's just a big circle that's around those counties. And we feel that that's an unfortunate situation given the population that we have in those 2 counties. The VA has outpatient clinics that they've established, one in Austell and in Cobb County and the other one in Lawrenceville in Gwinnett. And they're soon to be opening a community clinic down at the old clinic complex at Fort McPherson. That's, in fact, it's supposed to open up in about September of this year. And so we've been talking with the VA about getting office space to house 2-person offices in each of those clinics, and what we're asking for is to get those the money there to establish those positions so that we can provide assistance to the veterans in those areas. On page 17 are 2 cemeteries. When we started out that program about 10, 11 years ago, we started off with a staffing model of 5 people, and we've learned over the 10 years that we've been operating that 5 is 1 too short, particularly when you have people who are on sick leave or annual leave, and you have a number of interments that you have to deal with. So we're asking that primary staffing level be raised from 5 to 6, and then at Milledgeville, which is the facility that's been open the longest, we just opened our phase 2 expansion there, which was an additional 10 acres that we're now having to care for and maintain at VA Shrine standards, and so we're asking for a separate position for that requirement. In our administration program on page 18, we had a position there that was deleted as part of the governor's reduction. We'd like to reestablish that, but instead of having it in the records area where it was, our information technology section right now is composed of 1 person, and he's responsible for all 48 field offices, our claims and appeals division, our central office, and he's spread very, very thin. And when he's out in the field and something happens in central office or at claims, it goes uncared for because he's not available to do it. So we'd like to get a second position so that we've got 2 folks in that particular section. We've had difficulty with GTA on getting service out of those folks. We've been dealing with them, and we've had an ongoing problem, and we feel like if we could maintain that capability in-house with 2 folks, that would take care of our requirements. The last item is the Returning Veterans Task Force that is a pending piece of legislation in the Georgia Senate. Would be composed of 7 agencies of state government, our department, behavioral health, community health, defense, labor, university system, and the technical college system. The way the legislation reads, our department would be the chair of that task force. The legislation requires it to meet quarterly. report annually to the Speaker, the Lieutenant Governor, and the Governor, make recommendations and proposals for legislation to ensure that we're doing everything we can to assist returning veterans that are coming into the state of Georgia. As we looked at this legislation, it became apparent to us that to do this right, we need to take a proactive role and not just have meetings once a quarter and chair those meetings and listen to a bunch of people sit around a table talking. We need to be active in this. And because of the budget reductions and our staffing level, we feel that we need two folks to carry that off. One would be a staffer and another would be a clerical position to support that staff person. So those are the issues that we wanted to bring to your attention specifically. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to do my best to answer them.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions from the members? Just a minute.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
You said that there was for every VA that was buried, you're going to ask for an increase from $3 to $7?
No, ma'am. For every veteran that is buried in our cemeteries, the VA has raised the burial allowance. Actually, the federal government did it by law. They raised it from $300 per veteran burial to $700 per veteran burial.
Okay, that sounds a little bit more reasonable. I thought $3 to $7.
I wrote that down too. I
That wasn't going to get it. I knew I missed it.
If I said it, I said it wrong. That's for sure. But it's $300 and $700.
Okay.
And that was effective on October the 1st of this past year.
Do you anticipate that just staying there? Because that still seems...
The $300 number was in there for probably about 10 or 15 years. And the states across the nation that are participating in the state cemetery program, such as us, had been clamoring for a long, long time to get that raised. That it was just a very nominal amount, and it wasn't really doing that much to offset cost. And that clamoring from the field, if you will, was finally recognized by the Congress.
Are there any other questions?
I've got one more, but can't find it right
Well,
now.
take your time. It's okay. Take your time.
Oh, I wanted to find out, what is a shrine standard?
Shrine Standard? It is a program the VA has. They consider all of the cemeteries in the VA National Cemetery System, to include the national cemeteries and the state veteran cemeteries, to be shrines to the veterans who have served our nation in combat or just in peacetime, whatever the case may be. And they have established a program, if you will, for grading cemeteries. They come out every 3 years, do an inspection of each cemetery, and they have a checklist of things that we're supposed to meet. And based on how you do on that checklist, if you get a perfect score on all, I think it's 24 or 25 major items, and there's a whole bunch of subs underneath them, they give you what they call shrine status. And it's something that every cemetery strives to achieve, because it's a recognition that we are providing top flight service to our veterans and their families in this arena of taking care of perpetual care for the veterans.
But is it like, the grass is cut at 2.5 inches, or is it like? That's
one of them. The headstones have to be a certain height from the ground. They've all got to be lined up straight. The shrubbery has to be trimmed and neat in appearance, so that when the expectation is when you drive into a National Cemetery System facility, that you are going to be impressed by what you see. You're not going to see overgrown grass. You're not going to see unweeded flower beds. You're not going to see memorial markers that are laying over or some are 3 feet from the surface, and others are 2.5. Everything's going to be lined up perfectly. There's an old adage in the military about no one being out of step, and that's kind of the way in which they look at it.
But the cemetery takes not only veterans, but also family members?
They take normally spouses and authorized dependents. By an authorized dependent, I'm talking about someone who probably has some kind of a physical challenge, and because of that is unable to have lived on their own, and they stay with their parents, and when they die, they're authorized to be interred with the parents.
Okay, one last, Madam Chair, if I might. You say you're going to go into another phase, and it's going to be 10 acres, so...
No, we've already opened that phase.
Okay, how do you have to have shrine status for that phase?
Well, it's part of the Milledgeville facility, and so any shrine inspection that's done by the VA would include the entire facility, and that 10-acre phase 2 area would be included.
That's it for me.
He just said that you think of a beautiful place when you think of a shrine, and that's very, very true. Mm-hmm. As Buck can attest, he's been in my office and seen a photograph hanging on the wall of one of our water features at the Milledgeville facility, and we're very, very proud of both of our facilities.
As I think you should be.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions, then thank you so much for being here again this afternoon.
Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay, next I believe we have the Department of Labor. Commissioner Butler, if you are ready.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members. To kind of keep things brief and kind of to the point, I thought we would kind of just hit the high points here. There's a lot of standard changes in here, deductions that have a lot to do with the insurance changes, state personnel assessment, and so forth, and those are all going to be the same throughout the whole document. I didn't really think y'all needed to necessarily hear that all over again and again and again. Standard throughout all state governments, as far as I understand it. So what we'll do is let's go ahead, if you don't mind, and I hope I have the exact same tracking document that you do. Go to, I think it's 31.9, which I think is on page 72, which would be the first major change.
Unemployment
Mm-hmm.
insurance. Okay.
You'll see there, right there, it has language in there. It says, utilize existing state funds to pay the unemployment trust fund loan interest and maximize federal funds for program operations. That was not an ask of ours, an OPB. Those funds are very necessary. Those are general operating funds that we use to pay for career center operations, salaries, services, and if we were to lose those funds, it will have an impact on Department of Labor operations. This is compounded by the fact of the transfer of the Workforce Investment Act funds, which some of those funds are used to provide certain services and salaries throughout the agency. So once you combine the loss of the 5.7, which is AA money, it's money that's taken, it's an assessment taken off the trust fund, which goes toward operations. And then you couple the fact of the loss of vocational rehabilitation, there will be a personnel and Career Center impact throughout the state, if that stays in. We would ask that you change that yes to a no on that language. There is money appropriated right now in the governor's emergency fund that was appropriated for the interest payment that can cover that. It can definitely cover it now that the federal government has reduced the interest rate by 1 point. We were estimating the interest payment for next year to be somewhere close to $30 million. Now it's going to be somewhere between, I think it was 23 and 24 million. So they had set aside, I think, a little over $30 million in the governor's trust fund. But we definitely need that 5.7 for operations. The impact could be as many as 80 to 133 positions. It could be a closure of career centers, could be anywhere from 10 to 17. Some of those will be consolidations. We'll try to keep as many people at work as we can. We do have a few opportunities in a few areas where we might can fill some positions by transferring some people that wouldn't be too burdensome, but it would definitely lead to more difficult time for people and longer travels for them that are seeking services. And as you know, if somebody's unemployed or if they're in a job search right now, one of their main costs is going to be travel. As we see gas prices continue to go up, if that person has to travel an additional 15, 20, 30 miles, that can make a huge impact on their pocketbook. I know it would on mine if I was driving my truck. My truck right now is costing me about $120 to fill up every time. And if you're on unemployment, that's most of your weekly check right there in some cases. Let's see. The next area I'd like to talk to you about, go to section 31. Should be on my page number says 73. I don't know if that's, okay, you don't have the same page number, okay. The actual line we're looking at is 31.10.9. Y'all have that? All right, these two lines right here represent the cuts. We were required to submit a 2% cut to OPB for the governor's budget. And how we decided to do this cut is we're trying to minimize any cuts to any funds that affect matching dollars. And so roughly half of what we submitted is not matchable dollars. These are state contracts that do not qualify for the 110 matching funds. However, the cut that the 2% that we submitted, OPB actually increased that by an additional $180,159, which that money is 100% matchable. That was above and beyond what we submitted in the cuts. The reason why the cuts mostly have to come out of vocational rehabilitation, that's the only place where true state funds come into the agency. Everything else is collected funds. You take a look at, the UI program, what they call state dollars is actually AA collected funds. It's an assessment that was set up through legislation. It's also a federally approved program that we have to get permission from, certain guidelines. The money has to be put in a certain way, and those monies come in, which I also would have to note that we're not getting back 100% of those AA funds. We should have gotten around 24 million to split out throughout the agency. We only got about 14 million of that 24. So we're trying to make do what we can. However, there is some question about, is that the proper way to use that money? And on safety inspections, why that is 100% state funded, right now that program is woefully underfunded. It produces almost twice as much state revenue through collected funds as we put in it. And right now, due to increased costs because of travel, these individuals who do safety inspections are using their personal cars. We cannot afford to provide them with a state car. And so they get reimbursed on mileage plus salaries. We have a really hard time closing the books. We have to really start watching the P's and Q's when we get down to the very end of the budget year on that. And sometimes we have to suspend travel, suspend inspections. Also right now, we're having a very competitive market right now, holding on to our inspectors. The pay scale is much less than what we're having to compete against in the private sector. We have tried to hire some new inspectors. Some of them have stayed, some of them have left after a few weeks. And we've also lost some inspectors to the private sector here recently. A couple of them that we lost were very experienced, very good inspectors. Some of those were, through their inspections, we're bringing in anywhere from $150,000 to just under $200,000 a year in fees. So they were more than paying their way. So we only have so many places where we can make cuts. I would ask that you restore the $180,000 that was cut or added to the cut that OPB put in there. The other subject I'd like to bring up has to do with the transfer of vocational rehabilitation. As you can see, that is named throughout this document. However, I would have to caution one thing that has not been brought up and really has not been talked about very well is the transfer will cost money. We look back through historical documents when it was moved the last time, and plus just looking at systems that are going to have to be changed over, moving personnel from one location to the next. There are real costs involved here. We can provide you information where, on a very conservative estimate, can cost upwards of $2.5 million for the transfer. That money is not appropriated in this document. So that is a concern because the monies that would have to be used for any
Shrines to the veterans who have served our nation in combat or just in peacetime, whatever the case may be. And they have established a program, if you will, for grading cemeteries. They come out every 3 years, do an inspection of each cemetery, and they have a checklist of things that we're supposed to meet. And based on how you do on that checklist, if you get a perfect score on all, I think it's 24 or 25 major items, and there's a whole bunch of subs underneath them, they give you what they call shrine status. And it's something that every cemetery strives to achieve because it's a recognition that we are providing top flight service to our veterans and their families in this arena of taking care of perpetual care for the veterans.
But is it like, the grass is cut at 2.5 inches, or is it like? That's
one of them. The headstones have to be a certain height from the ground. They've all got to be lined up straight. The shrubbery has to be trimmed and neat in appearance so that the expectation is when you drive into a National Cemetery System facility that you are going to be impressed by what you see. You're not going to see overgrown grass. You're not going to see unweeded flower beds. You're not going to see memorial markers that are laying over, or some are 3 feet from the surface and others are 2.5. Everything's going to be lined up perfectly. There's an old adage in the military about no one being out of step, and that's kind of the way in which they look at it.
But the cemetery takes not only veterans but also family members?
They take normally spouses and authorized dependents. By an authorized dependent, I'm talking about someone who probably has some kind of a physical challenge, and because of that is unable to have lived on their own, and they stay with their parents, and when they die, they're authorized to be interred with the parents.
Okay, one last, Madam Chair, if I might. You say you're going to go into another phase, and it's going to be 10 acres. So
no, we've already opened that phase.
Okay, how do you have to have shrine status for that phase?
Well, it's part of the Milledgeville facility, and so any shrine inspection that's done by the VA would include the entire facility, and that 10-acre phase 2 area would be included.
That's it for me.
He just said that you think of a beautiful place when you think of a shrine, and that's very, very true.
Mm-hmm.
as Buck can attest, he's been in my office and seen a photograph hanging on the wall of one of our water features at the Milledgeville facility, and we're very, very proud of both of our facilities.
As I think you should be.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions, then thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
here again this afternoon.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. I can get Andrew to bring us one to her just a minute. Send her a message. And we're adding on. I've got my secretary bringing us up. Okay, next I believe we have the Department of Labor. Commissioner Butler, if you are ready.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members. To kind of keep things brief and kind of to the point, I thought we would kind of just hit the high points here. There's a lot of standard changes in here, deductions that have a lot to do with the insurance changes, state personnel assessment, and so forth, and those are all going to be same throughout the whole document. I didn't really think y'all needed to necessarily hear that all over again and again and again. Standard throughout all state governments, as far as I understand it. So what we'll do is let's go ahead, if you don't mind, and I hope I have the exact same tracking document that you do. Go to, I think it's 31.9, which I think is on page 72, which would be the first major change.
Unemployment
Mm-hmm.
insurance. Okay.
You'll see there, right there, it has language in there. It says, utilize existing state funds to pay the unemployment trust fund loan interest and maximize federal funds for program operations. That was not an ask of ours, an OPB. Those funds are very necessary. Those are general operating funds that we use to pay for career center operations, salaries, services, and if we were to lose those funds, it will have an impact on Department of Labor operations. This is compounded by the fact of the transfer of the Workforce Investment Act funds, which some of those funds are used to provide certain services and salaries throughout the agency. So once you combine the loss of the 5.7, which is AA money, it's money that's taken, it's an assessment taken off the trust fund, which goes toward operations. And then you couple the fact of the loss of vocational rehabilitation, there will be a personnel and career center impact throughout the state if that stays in. We would ask that you change that yes to a no on that language. There is money appropriated right now in the governor's emergency fund that was appropriated for the interest payment that can cover that. It can definitely cover it now that the federal government has reduced the interest rate by 1 point. We were estimating the interest payment for next year to be somewhere close to $30 million. Now it's going to be somewhere between, I think it was 23 and 24 million. So they had set aside, I think, a little over 30 million in the governor's trust fund. But we definitely need that 5.7 for operations. The impact could be as many as 80 to 133 positions. It could be a closure of career centers, could be anywhere from 10 to 17. Some of those will be consolidations. We'll try to keep as many people at work as we can. We do have a few opportunities in a few areas where we might can fill some positions by transferring some people that wouldn't be too burdensome, but it would definitely lead to more difficult time for people and longer travels for them that are seeking services. And as you know, if somebody's unemployed or if they're in a job search right now, one of their main costs is going to be travel. As we see gas prices continue to go up, if that person has to travel an additional 15, 20, 30 miles, that can make a huge impact on their pocketbook. I know it would on mine if I was driving my truck. My truck right now is costing me about $120 to fill up every time. And if you're on unemployment, that's most of your weekly check right there in some cases. Let's see. The next area I'd like to talk to you about, go to section 31. It should be on my page number says 73. I don't know if that's, okay, you don't have the same page number, okay. The actual line we're looking at is 31.10.9. Y'all have that? All right, these two lines right here represent the cuts. We were required to submit a 2% cut to OPB for the governor's budget. And how we decided to do this cut is we're trying to minimize any cuts to any funds that affect matching dollars. And so roughly half of what we submitted is not matchable dollars. These are state contracts that do not qualify for the 110 matching funds. However, the cut that the 2% that we submitted, OPB actually increased that by an additional $180,159, which that money is 100% matchable. That was above and beyond what we submitted in the cuts. The reason why the cuts mostly have to come out of vocational rehabilitation, that's the only place where true state funds come into the agency. Everything else is collected funds. You take a look at, the UI program, what they call state dollars is actually AA collected funds. It's an assessment that was set up through legislation. It's also a federally approved program that we have to get permission from, certain guidelines. The money has to be put in a certain way, and those monies come in, which I also would have to note that we're not getting back 100% of those AA funds. We should have gotten around $24 million to split out throughout the agency. We only got about $14 million of that 24. So we're trying to make do what we can. However, there is some question about, is that the proper way to use that money? And on safety inspections, why that is 100% state funded, right now that program is woefully underfunded. It produces almost twice as much state revenue through collected funds as we put in it. And right now, due to increased costs because of travel, these individuals who do safety inspections are using their personal cars. We cannot afford to provide them with a state car. And so they get reimbursed on mileage plus salaries. We have a really hard time closing the books. We have to really start watching the P's and Q's when we get down to the very end of the budget year on that. And sometimes we have to suspend travel and suspend inspections. Also right now, we're having a very competitive market right now, holding on to our inspectors. The pay scale is much less than what we're having to compete against in the private sector. We have tried to hire some new inspectors. Some of them have stayed, some of them have left after a few weeks. And we've also lost some inspectors to the private sector here recently. A couple of them that we lost were very experienced, very good inspectors. Some of those were, through their inspections, we're bringing in anywhere from $150,000 to just under $200,000 a year in fees. So they were more than paying their way. So we only have so many places where we can make cuts. I would ask that you restore the $180,000 that was cut or added to the cut that OPB put in there. The other subject I'd like to bring up has to do with the transfer of vocational rehabilitation. As you can see, that is named throughout this document. However, I would have to caution one thing that has not been brought up and really has not been talked about very well is the transfer will cost money. We look back through historical documents when it was moved the last time, and plus just looking at systems that are going to have to be changed over, moves, moving personnel from one location to the next. There are real costs involved here. We can provide you information where, on a very conservative estimate, can cost upwards of $2.5 million for the transfer. That money is not appropriated in this document. So that is a concern because the monies that would have to be used for any type of transfer and changing it over would directly impact vocational rehabilitation. On top of that, we have some great concerns about the separation between our career center activities and vocational rehabilitation. Instead of just being pure, 100% state dollars, we could match that. So there's some monies that could have been used there that we could actually, 4-to-1 match on that. Those are possibilities.
I was thinking there were some funds over in DHS that were work-related at one time.
Well, like I said, I'm sure, almost every
Right.
almost every agency has some type of lapse funds.
But these were actually, I think, well, I'll get.
I'm sure they can probably answer that there, but I have seen figures about different agencies' lapse funds. We see the same thing that a lot of other people do. So,
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Yes, Representative Henson.
Thank you. Thank you.
okay, sorry.
Yeah. With all the transfers being proposed with your department, is this on? Okay. With all the transfers being proposed in your department, because they're being moved from labor to another department, are we at risk at losing any federal matching dollars because of them going to a different department?
Yes.
Which ones might those be?
Well, it goes back to the OASIS program that we have. It's where we use resources, persons, individuals, in what I guess to separate it for conversation, because I hate separating the two houses because I kind of view them as one because we're all trying to get people back to work. But your career center, traditional labor, we use personnel and resources to help. When you have somebody come in our door that may have disability in our career center, they can do the assessment there through the OASIS program. It's a program that was started and invented here in Georgia. It's a matter of fact, the person who did that is sitting in this room right here. And it allows us to take and leverage Department of Labor resources to draw down additional federal dollars. And the system works fantastic. I mean, you take a look at the results that we've had. Ever since that the two programs have been married together, we've seen a 25% increase in placements. Matter of fact, the feds, when they came back this summer and, looked through, things that they looked through, they made note of the fact that they were impressed by the fact that in every single year during this recession, we've increased placements every single year. They said we're one of the very few states that's been able to do that. That almost every other state in the nation, during this recession, their placements for people with disabilities have gone down consistently every single year. And the program works.
Thank you. I guess the second thing that I have a great concern with, I'm sorry, you're having a hard time hearing me.
Yeah, I am a little bit.
Maybe if I just yell louder, is that better?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. I know, but he's having a hard time hearing me if I try talking into
No,
that.
that's fine. I think it was I was getting a little bit of an echo.
That's what I was thinking. My major concern is if somebody loses a job, goes on unemployment, they come into your office or one of your offices that's under Department of Labor, and they do everything. It's like one-stop shopping. I think that's how it's been explained in the past, isn't it?
Yes.
Who's going to guide them through the new process? I mean, that seems very convoluted, and how many different places will they have to go to and whatnot, and...
Well, I think that is the biggest concern. The one-stop process works well because you don't want the office just to be somewhere where they go and sign up for unemployment. I mean, we have employment services, and we'll still continue to do that, and we still work with our partners and the workforce investment boards to make sure that people get available training, things like that. Matter of fact, I think the chairman is very aware of how our process has worked in the past using rapid response money, which is money which, and some of the stuff I really cannot speak to know in a factual way, and I'm not going to sit there and tell you, because some of this money that's being moved, there's some discussion about some of it may be, MOU'd back to us, but, we still don't have any firm grasp on that. We don't have anything on paper. We don't really know. But in a worst case scenario, if stuff like rapid response is no longer the Department of Labor, when things like the mental hospital up in Rome were closed, it causes things for us to have a harder time to pull together resources, because what we do when we have a large layoff, we will actually pick up and put an office in that location to help those employees on site. And we've had some cases where they were there for a month. We've had some where they were there for over a year, depending on the type of closing and how many people and how long it takes. And it costs money to be able to do that and get it in there. But that's one of the reasons why we are so good at getting people back to work faster than other states. It's because all those services are integrated. So my biggest concern is we're going to end up looking like everybody else instead of being better than everybody else. You know, so, I mean, my concern is your concern. I mean, we're going to do everything that we can with the resources we have, but there comes a point where there's only so much that you can cut out of the Department of Labor and it's still to be able to do the job that we need to do. And we're at that point. Matter of fact, we're a little bit past that point, to be quite honest.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Chairman Manning.
On 31.10.10.
Hold on.
It's under vocational rehab. You reduced some contracts for specialized services.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what kind of services those were and what the size of those contracts were? Because it looks like it's $472,000. I was just curious as to what.
We can get you a list of those. It's actually a very long list, and I don't think do you have that list here? Or? No, okay.
What kinds of things were they, Commissioner?
Yeah, no, we can tell you how much that we offered up, but if anything that came through additional cuts with OPB, I'd have to figure out where that's coming from another source. But we can get you a list of all those contracts and show you in there. But basically, you try to make it fair and even with everybody. I mean, we're not cutting one program or one contract more than the other. I mean, it's prorated.
Okay. One last, Madam Chair. Under this first thing that you started with, the unemployment trust fund,
Yes,
and how you were going to repay that, is there any way that you could kind of either put that in the form of a schematic or something so we could see how the numbers flow? Because you went through that so rapidly that I'm not sure I got it. You know what I'm saying?
You talking about when we talked earlier this year? Mm-hmm. Yes, I can get you all kind of charts. We can get you all kind of spreadsheets.
Well, you know, I'm a visual, so I.
But you know, a lot of it's going to depend on if any legislation is passed to make some changes. I'm somewhat limited in what I can do with executive authority to make any kind of changes to the system at all.
Well, didn't they just extend it some more?
Okay, you're talking about extended benefits in the federal government. That does not affect the state trust fund. Those are federal dollars.
Okay, well, I guess what I'm trying to do is we borrowed all that money, and what I'm trying to figure out is how we're going to pay it back in the next 3 years without our unemployment folks, I mean, our employers having to pay that $21 this year and $42 next year and all that.
Right. Okay, well, that's how that works is, you know, you're right, we do have to pay the money back as quickly as possible.
Right.
Because for every year that this goes on, the federal government's going to add $21 per employee per year. And, you know, they can get it on up there pretty high.
Yeah.
The longer you go. We've developed some ideas and some plans. We've shared them with leadership, the governor's office. And, you know, I think there's a couple of bills kind of flying around right now that can help cut back some of the outflows in the system and also bring in additional revenue. So between the combination of those two, you know, that's the plan to get it paid back. However, I will say one thing, you know, I do not like the fact the Feds, their terms on this loan are not that favorable. I mean, they did knock off a 1 point on the interest rate, which that was nice of them, and I do appreciate that. I wish they had knocked 2 points off of it to make it look like everybody else. But the additional $21, at least 100% of that increase goes toward the principal balance. And that's estimated to be somewhere around 60 to 65 million next year, and that will help pay down our loan.
If you could just get me a little schematic of that, it would help.
We can load you up on information like that. Matter of fact, I may have a little bit.
I don't want too much, but I just want a little.
Of course, a lot of that will depend. A lot of those numbers can change rapidly depending on what is decided in the final bill. I mean, you can change one thing that can have a drastic difference in when the payout is. So, I mean, it's kind of a moving target right now. But we can give you some idea, or I can have some folks come by and show you some of the things that are going around and how they play out, and maybe, you know, give you.
My constituents are extremely concerned about what's going to happen.
And so are we.
Okay, thank you.
That's why we got to get Georgians back to work so that we have less people on unemployment and they don't have to worry about all this.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner, you
presentation about all the personal transfers to other departments. A great portion of these employees are located on your, I guess, International Boulevard location, is that right?
Yeah, we have a great deal of those there.
Okay. The lease or the rental cost for that property, is it still factored into your budget for the 2013 fiscal year?
International Boulevard?
Yes.
We
Is that where
own,
you-
we own that building. It's
Oh,
paid,
you own it.
and by the way, it's paid for.
Oh, okay, okay.
Does it have
That's pretty exciting, isn't it?
What was the
It
question?
doesn't have any asbestos, does it?
Can we talk about that later?
Oh.
No, there was, we did find a few cases of some tile that was removed, but I mean, no. I mean, it was all taken care of and remediated like it was supposed to be, but it was like some buildings that you see that are called, but that was handled, but yeah, that building's paid for.
Okay. All right.
We have a large mixture of rentals versus what we own. Depending on career centers and locations, that kind of thing. I would like to consolidate into less buildings, especially in the metro areas for some of our central office staff. That would be something that we could possibly save some money down the road, but right now it's just not feasible to do that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. We appreciate you being here and all that you are doing. As I said, the last time we heard from you, you were first on the scene in my community to help us so much when the hospital did close. Thank you. If there are any further questions, we'll be in touch with you.
Thank you.
If we are going to have to take just oh, excuse me, did you need to? No, I need to see them. Okay. We're going to have to take just a couple of minutes break here. If y'all would excuse me just a minute, there's something going on that I need to go attend to, but don't go far. I would say it'll probably be 10 or 15 minutes at the most if anyone needs to take a little break from the committee. And I apologize, Ms. Ballard, you are up next, so thank you.